E.T. the Extraterrestrial centers around the relationship between the alien being who comes to be known as E.T. and his young earthly companion Elliot, after being accidentally left behind by his fellow alien buddies, who leave in a hurry as a result of the presence of nearby government agents. Though Elliot at first fears E.T. like any normal person would, he eventually builds a deep emotional connection with E.T., teaching him the way of living on Earth and eventually introducing him to the rest of his family. However, it becomes apparent that the relationship between E.T. and Elliot is not only on a compassionate level, but on a psychic level, as whatever happens to E.T. will happen to Elliot. Elliot soon becomes aware of the fact that E.T. is in urgent need of returning to his people, so he constantly chants the famous E.T. phone home line, and so Elliot aids E.T. in building his radar to phone to his people to pick him up. After beating government agents and other conflicts with the law, Elliot successfully gets E.T. back to his ship, thus allowing the little alien to finally return home. After being left alone at the house while Elliot is off at school, E.T. explores the house for something to consume. When he stumbles upon the fridge, he takes whatever he first sees, which happens to be a nice cold Coors Light, and chugs it down. This action displays E.T.'s need to satisfy his physiological need of hunger or thirst, whichever one it is that he feels. Though E.T. has eaten plenty of times before this is the first instance that displays him actually going out of his way to satisfy his need and reduce his drive. This in turn allows him to move on to the next level of Maslow's hierarchy. Following his bit of an altered state of consciousness, E.T. goes on to learn the English language through a Sesame Street program that Gertie, Elliot's younger sister, is watching. Though learning the language of the Californian people does not seem like a safety need, it actually provides E.T. safety and comfort in being able to communicate with the people who are the only ones that can provide him help. It also aids in ensuring that E.T. and those he is speaking to can understand one another. As for example, when Gertie had barged into Elliot's room, her shrieking and E.T.'s inability to communicate led to an unsafe environment, as E.T. was to remain out of sight of their mother. The continuous shrieking and inability of E.T. to speak for himself would have led to his detection. E.T.'s belongingness begins to take shape as his fondness, psychic, and emotional connection with Elliot grows. The two become inseparable, and especially on Elliot's part, E.T. becomes a major part of his life, thus providing E.T. with a sense of belonging in the world of humans. For example, Elliot attempts to make sure that E.T. essentially never leaves his side. This is shown during the quarantine scene when E.T. dies for several minutes, as Elliot and E.T. display their bond in which Elliot screams, just as E.T.'s monitor flatlines.
He's got no pulse or respiration. You can't get a pulse or blood pressure on the creature. He doesn't look like he's breathing. You can't break a stone. Feel like that. How's he doing?
E.T. displays his high sense of self-esteem through his unearthly powers. Early on in the movie, when Elliot takes E.T. to the forest to try out the communication device, E.T. levitates the bike that the two are riding on, thus allowing them to fly and creating the famous moon scene. But in this case, he only levitates himself and Elliot. Following Elliot's escape from the agents, he and his brother's friends attempt to elude the police, leading to E.T.'s high self-esteem to levitate 5 kids compared to the only one early on. This shows E.T.'s confidence in his powers. The whole movie revolves around this event in which E.T. self-actualizes, when he finally goes home. By this point, he has become the best he can be. He has reached a peak in his relationship with Elliot, his English skills are pretty advanced, and he has mastered the art of making a communication device. Each aspect of his life in which he has become the best he can be has aided in his ability to go home. E.T. is intrinsically motivated in the sense of bettering himself by understanding the system of the earthly world so that he will be able to return home. He learns the way of their language, which allows him to understand their different words that will enable him to get his message across. For example, when he picked up the words phone and home, learning these two crucial words allowed him to get his message across to phone home. E.T. is extrinsically motivated to build his communication device so that he will be able to return home. A majority of his actions are done so that he can get in contact with the spaceship, which can pick him up and ultimately take him home. For example, by building his radar device, he seeks to avoid the punishment of being left on Earth. I see Maslow's hierarchy of needs as being applied to my job at the lovely Kango Sushi. During my shifts, I always get thirsty, so without fulfilling this physiological need of quenching my thirst, I will be unable to concentrate on being able to serve the customers. By doing so, it enables me to focus on other aspects of my job that relate to the higher levels of the hierarchy. In the case of Kango Sushi, being safe means doing the job right so that I can avoid being yelled at by my boss. So after my basic physiological need is fulfilled, I can be able to focus on my own safety, which will allow me to avoid being chastised. So for example, I'll make sure customers are seated, their orders are taken, their glass is filled, etc. By establishing friendships with my coworkers at Kenga, I'm able to feel that I belong. This can be especially said when we vent and provide support for one another, aka unconditional positive regard. When I'm feeling down about my job, I know that I can go to them so that I can feel better about myself and ignore those negative feelings of quitting. In fulfilling my self-esteem needs at Kengo, I aim to provide the best service and experience for each of the customers that come in. In the case of me not performing my best, I tend to feel a sense of low self-worth towards myself and an intense desire to quit and avoid putting myself in that situation. But in the event that my service is exceptional, I feel extremely good about myself afterwards, almost as if I own Kengo. In turn, this motivates me to want to keep my job there. Ultimately, my number one goal at Kengo is to be the best that I can be, meaning that I would not have to rely on asking questions to my coworkers of what needs to be done, as well as to be the best server that I can be. I would love to be able to crack some jokes, provide excellent service, and just be noticed and stand out towards the customers. Also, I aim to stand out in the eyes of my boss so that when I do quit, I can get the necessary recommendation for a future job.
E.T. Phone Home.